way, I'm glad this channel forces me to watch each episode for a second time. Fully accepting the elements that annoyed me, notebook in hand, I was able to dive into this episode with a more analytical lens and truly bask in the quality elements it did have to offer. Primest example being the refreshed opening credits. You know we're in the endgame when the map is cut back to only 4 locations as opposed to the usual my raid. It was able to use the extra time to dive deeper into the specific locations at play by showcasing various sub-locations within the greater area. For example, the deep dive into the crypts of Winterfell only added fuel to the fire of the popular theory that the Starks buried there will be reanimated by the White Walkers during the approaching Battle of Winterfell. One important but notably missing location, however, was Volantis. If you remember back to last season, Melisandre left the Westerosi continent to travel to this SOC port city. She cited it as being home to the largest temple of the Faith of R'hllor, otherwise known as the Lord of Light, in the known world. Will they simply skip her time there, having her arrive with the Greater Red Priesthood during the midst of battle? We'll just have to wait and see, but a lack of feature in the intro sequence isn't a very good sign. Before we depart from the opening sequence, I wanted to bring to light something you may have missed upon your first viewing. The rotating astrolabe that floats around the sequence is no longer depicting the events of Robert's Rebellion. Rather, it is now showcasing the events of the seasons prior. I thought this was an extremely clever touch on the showrunner's behalves. Moving into the episode proper, we're greeted with a kickoff scene that perfectly mirrors Season 1 Episode 1, when King Robert and the Lannisters arrived in Winterfell. Rather than Bran running and climbing around to witness their arrival, we are given a random northern child. Rather than King Robert and his posse arriving, it is Daenerys, Jon, and company. This narrative poetry is absolutely incredible and perfectly showcases the progress these characters have made over the past 7 seasons. Amidst the crowds gathered to witness the arrival of their new queen is Arya. Maisie proves herself once again as an incredible actress. Her varied but equally potent facial expressions in reaction to the arrival of friends, family, and reluctant allies she hasn't seen in many years shows that Arya, despite all she's been through, is still a child. Although a pleasant scene in the forefront, this really is absolutely heartbreaking at its core. Amongst Daenerys' party are, of course, Missandei and Grey Worm. The reactions of the northern peasants as the two ride into Winterfell is indicative of a fact that you don't typically consider in the world of Ice and Fire. Despite living in a vast world with innumerable races, cultures, and countries, this is likely the first time any of these individuals are seeing people that aren't white. Not much to analyze further than that, but the writers made an effort to point this out, so I thought I should as well. The first of many long-anticipated reunions in this episode is Jon and Bran. I have to admit, this scene did have me teary-eyed upon first viewing. If you remember, the last time Jon saw Bran was when he was still in a coma back in Season 1. Think about the journeys both of them have taken from that point. I guess now is a better time than ever to point out the unintentional use of Bran as comedic gold in this episode. Every time he appeared and every line he spoke had me cracking up. When he interrupted Dany and Sansa's formalities with, "We don't have time for this," I lost it. Moving along, Jon's first council meeting after returning to Winterfell leads me to the point that probably frustrates me the most about this episode. Why does everyone constantly find the need to shit on Jon for bending the knee to Daenerys? He explained it himself, he gave up his crown to save his people. He knows that Daenerys' rule, and in turn her military and reptilian resources, are invaluable in the fight against the army of the dead. So my question is why no one else, especially Sansa, seems to believe him. Now I get it. The Northerners have famously hated Targaryen since Torrhen Stark bent the knee to Aegon the Conqueror 300 years ago. The fire of this hatred was only fueled by the onset of Robert's Rebellion, when the Mad King Aerys killed Ned Stark's father and brother, and Rhaegar Targaryen supposedly kidnapped Lyanna Stark. Can't Sansa and the other Northern Lords see past this history and focus on the threat to come? The wall has been crossed. The White Walkers are probably just days away, and you're busy throwing a fit about having to serve a Targaryen? Get your priorities straight. The aftermath of this meeting sees the long-anticipated reunion of Tyrion and Sansa. I honestly found this scene to be somewhat disappointing. There was the apology from Sansa. After all, her abandonment of Tyrion in the wake of Joffrey's wedding murder helped fuel the flame of his guilty verdict. However, I feel there needed to be a bit more here. Perhaps some compassion, some friendly banter. They were married, after all. Although he didn't love her, Tyrion did genuinely care for Sansa and treated her very well. He was perhaps the strongest positive male role model in her life after the death of her father. Look, I don't mean to rant. All I'm saying is that this could have been a more substantial scene. It does, however, end with Bran staring up at Tyrion from below the balcony. When Bran stares at someone and dramatic music plays, you know it means they have an important role to play in the battles to come. Moving along on the reunion train, we get my most anticipated reunion of the episode, Jon and Arya. They had an extremely close relationship at the onset of the series, perhaps even closer than any of the other Stark siblings. I was fully expecting to cry during this scene due to the inherent emotional potency, Cersei, but it just didn't get me. Don't get me wrong, there was nothing really wrong with it per se. It was very nice. Maybe it was just the lack of accompanying score, but there wasn't the major emotional payoff that I was expecting. The passage of this scene allows us to move down to King's Landing, where we get Euron. I guess now's a better time than ever for my obligatory Euron rant. I've come to terms with it. The showrunners just ruined the character. The Euron of the books is, quite simply, a completely different character in the show. He does fill the same general role, having usurped the Iron Irons, forcing Yara to flee. Theon was still Ramsay's prisoner at this point in the books. However, his motives, methods, and overall personality are polar opposites. Rather than the cocky, obnoxious jock he comes off as in the show, his book counterpart is a cold, calculating psychopath of sorts. The show traded cryptic utterings, a god complex, and even a strong connection to mysterious magic for dick jokes and wanting to fuck the queen. The tip of the Euron frustration iceberg is how easy Theon and Yara got off. Don't get me wrong, I do think we'll see Euron hunt them down and virtually destroy them next episode. If not, then this was just inexcusably bad writing. It just seems odd to me that Yara got away tongue intact. Oh yeah, what Euron did do in this episode was bringing the Golden Company over from Essos for Cersei. Sorry, book readers, not only are we not getting any elephants, but it looks like we're not even getting as much as a reference to their Blackfyre heritage, a plot point that is shaping out to be one of the most important elements of the books to come. In the wake of the Golden Company's arrival, Cersei's behavior in this episode leaves me with nothing but questions. Why did she break so easily to Euron? She's the queen, for God's sake. She should have shown more restraint. Has Jaime's departure really left her that desperate for attention? Additionally, if she's pregnant, why was she drinking wine? I was tempted to cite this as a lack of awareness in that time period, but last season, her refusal to drink wine was what helped Tyrion realize she was pregnant in the first place. Has her miscarriage already happened? Was she lying about the pregnancy altogether? Remember, there's prophecy in place stating that she'll only have 3 children, all of whom will die before her. Through Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, this prophecy has already come true. The birth of a 4th child is quite simply a narrative impossibility. Before we leave King's Landing and head back north, everyone's favorite sellsword Bronn is waving major death flags. Despite what most of the community has been theorizing, I think this is, quite simply, a trap by Cersei. I have a feeling that the second he walks out that door, he's done. But who knows, I could be wrong. He could just go up north with the initial intention to kill Jaime and Tyrion, or hell, with no true intention to do so at all and end up fighting by their side anyway. We'll just have to wait and see. The crossbow was a nice twisted callback from Cersei to how Tyrion killed Tywin though. Now back up north, we get an interesting callback to the new prequel book Fire and Blood, and the line about Dany's dragons not liking the north. For the sake of time, I'll just refer you to my Fire and Blood first impressions video and have you do the math from there. But this clever bit of writing is unfortunately followed by one of the dumbest writing decisions in the entire episode. Why did Dany let Jon get on the back of a dragon? She doesn't know Jon is a Targaryen. Does she not realize how extremely rare it is for a dragon to allow a rider of non-Valyrian descent? Was it a weird oversight or a skirting of the rules for convenience? It's hard to say. Regardless, I could see the thematic resonance they were trying to go for here, Jon riding Rhaegal, the dragon named after his true father. The scene that followed their flight, however, was an incredible callback to Jon's first love, Ygritte. If you remember, the first time the two made love was in front of a waterfall. Does this mean that Jon's second bout with true love will end as tragically? Only time will tell. As for Drogon's reaction to Jon and Dany kissing, unlike most viewers who saw it as a parental sternness of sorts, I saw it as approval, as the dragons are sensing Jon's Valyrian blood. Back at Winterfell proper, we get back-to-back anticipated reunions for Arya. First with the Hound, who I half expected to break into a hug, but appreciated his commitment to his feigned sternness. Then with Gendry, who she flirtily requested craft the weapon that may be the one to kill the Night King. Many fans have speculated that she'll be the one to do the deed, so this does make sense if that theory comes to fruition. I just don't buy it personally, but knowing my luck, I'll probably be proven wrong. This scene does raise some small death flags for Arya and or Gendry, however. The two can't just live happily ever after together, not in Game of Thrones. We then get a series best performance from John Bradley when Samwell finds out that Daenerys executed his father and brother last season. Sam's relationship with his father has always been rocky. His father disinherited him as his heir and forced him to join the Night's Watch in the first place. His brother, on the other hand, was someone he always genuinely loved, someone that was usually kind to him. The acting in the scene was already Emmy-worthy, and we're only one episode in. This scene leads beautifully into Sam revealing to Jon his true parentage. I liked how Sam's anger was channeled into his reveal. Sam's bitter, rage-filled approach set the tone for Jon's intake of the information. If Sam hadn't heard the news about his family first and approached the conveyance calm and collected, it wouldn't have been framed in the context that Jon should be taking what is his by right, putting him at the odds with Dany. It seems Bran intended for this course of events to play out this way, as he instructed Sam to tell Jon now despite having just gotten the tragic news from Dany. Before the Winterfell-based conclusion of the episode, we get a small glimpse at what's been going on even farther in the north. I'd like to apologize apologize for my mistake in my Night of Impressions video. I just immediately assumed Tormund, Beric, and Dolorous Edd were simply in another castle along the wall. This, however, was clearly Last Hearth, the seat of House Umber. How I didn't realize that after seeing Ned Umber, the child leader of the house who was sent home earlier in the episode, pinned to the wall is beyond me. Speaking of this site, it's one of the biggest takeaways of the episode. Once again, we are greeted to the familiar symbol from the Night King. Having used some form of it since all the way back in the very first episode of the show, it seems this symbol is the only way for the Night King to convey his true intentions. I'm not going to dive into my Isle of Faces interpretation here. Despite being an increasingly likely theory in the books, it seems that the show just isn't going to take that route. I'll tell you what, if it seems like they will, I'll make an entirely separate video on the subject just for you. What it does seem to indicate in the show, however, is the Night King's initial creation. If you remember Bran's Weirwood flashback in season 6, we saw a first man transformed into the Night King by the Children of the Forest. He was trapped to a weirwood tree, and the tree was surrounded by a rock formation in the shape of the very spiral we saw this episode, and in past episodes throughout the series for that matter. It seems that the Night King's motivation is intrinsically tied to his origin. He's trying to tell everyone that. Finally, we get the cliffhanger, which was my personal favorite scene of the episode. When I first saw the shadowy cloaked figure bobbing its way into Winterfell, my immediate gut book reader reaction was Howlander Quaith, Howlander Quaith, Howlander Quaith. Although I was praying for the latter, I was leaning toward the prior, especially after Bran said, "I'm waiting for an old friend" earlier in the episode. Howland would be an old friend of sorts to Bran, as not only was he the father of Jojen and Mira, but he was a prominent figure in the flashback Bran saw to the Tower of Joy incident. Enough book rambling. Of course it was Jaime. Who else would it have been? Jaime's reaction when seeing Bran for the first time since he pushed him out the window all those years ago was an incredible testament to the already proven acting skills of Nikolai Coster-Waldau. I hope I didn't butcher the pronunciation of that name. Thanks to his award-worthy acting and George's incredible writing, Jaime is my favorite character in the show, and one of my top 5 in the books. I have full confidence that Bran is going to immediately forgive him. After all, it was this push from the tower and the subsequent paralysis it gave him that began Bran down the path toward becoming the all-seeing Lovecraftian entity he is today. That incredible cliffhanger just about wraps up my breakdown. If you feel there's anything that I missed or have any questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Who knows, perhaps I'll make an entirely separate video answering one of them. If you enjoyed this video and like to see more Season 8 coverage, or overall Game of Thrones A Song of Ice and Fire content of this nature, be sure to smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. For Game of Thrones news, theories, and even shitposting, follow me over on Twitter at Prof of Thrones. For updates on my fiction writing and gonzo journalism, visit www.joshuaclafter.com. No need for memorization, all these links will be in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and remember, the Professor of Thrones is here to teach you.